In the vast expanse of the galaxy, where civilizations rise and fall like distant stars, there exists a universal truth that every advanced species learns: technology conquers all. Energy shields that could deflect plasma cannons, armor forged from materials harder than diamond, weapons that could level mountains with a single shot. For millennia, the Galactic Coalition had perfected warfare to an art form of overwhelming technological superiority. Then, humanity arrived. With their crude gunpowder weapons and primitive metal projectiles, Earth's military was dismissed as laughably obsolete. The alien commanders chuckled at intelligence reports showing humans still using kinetic projectiles, technology so ancient that most species had abandoned it before they even achieved spaceflight. What could these backwards primates possibly offer to galactic warfare? The answer came in the form of a single bullet, fired from 2 kilometers away, that did what no plasma cannon or energy weapon had ever accomplished. It pierced through shields that had never been breached, punched through armor that had never been dented, and changed the course of galactic history forever. This is the story of how Earth's most primitive weapon became the galaxy's most feared tool, and how a human sniper with a simple rifle taught the universe that sometimes, the old ways are the deadliest ways. What happens when unstoppable technology meets immovable human ingenuity? The galaxy is about to find out. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Terran Defense Academy as Sergeant Marcus Chen adjusted the scope on his rifle for the 100th time. The weapon was a relic by galactic standards, a modified Barrett M82 that his grandfather had used in the old Earth Wars. While other species wielded plasma rifles that could melt through steel or particle beams that disrupted molecular bonds, Marcus carried a gun that fired simple metal bullets propelled by chemical explosions. "Chen, you're up for demonstration," called Colonel Harrison, gesturing toward the makeshift firing range they'd constructed for their galactic visitors. The delegation from the Galactic Coalition stood in a cluster, their various forms creating a bizarre tableau against the earthly backdrop. Commander Zektar, a towering Vraxian with chitinous armor naturally grown from his exoskeleton, looked particularly amused. His species had perfected energy warfare centuries before humans had discovered fire. Beside him, the ethereal luminary representative seemed to shimmer in and out of visibility, her energy-based physiology making her naturally incompatible with kinetic weapons. "This should be entertaining," Zektar's translator device rendered his clicking speech into standard galactic. "Show us how your primitive chemical launchers work, human." Marcus felt the familiar weight of his rifle as he settled into position. He'd been shooting since he was 12 years old, trained by his father who'd learned from his father. 3 generations of snipers, each one refining techniques that had been passed down through human military tradition for centuries. What the aliens didn't understand was that while they'd perfected technology, humans had perfected the art of violence itself. The target sat 2 kilometers away, a standard coalition armor plate mounted on a post. It was made from compressed neutronium composite, the same material used in their battlesuits. No handheld weapon in the coalition arsenal could penetrate it. That was the point of the demonstration. "The target is protected by a standard deflector shield," announced Dr. Yelnara, the coalition's weapons specialist. Her forearms gestured gracefully as she explained the technology to the gathered Earth military observers. "The shield creates a localized distortion field that redirects energy-based attacks. Your projectile weapons should simply bounce off." Marcus smiled grimly. He'd studied the technical specifications they'd provided, spent weeks analyzing the shield patterns with Earth's best physicists. What the aliens didn't realize was that humans had been finding ways around armor for millennia. Every innovation in protection had been met with an innovation in penetration. Through his scope, Marcus could see the shimmering distortion that marked the shield's presence. It was impressive technology, he had to admit. The field could deflect particle beams, absorb plasma blasts, and redirect energy weapons with ease. But it had one fundamental flaw that its creators had never considered: it was designed to stop energy, not matter. The wind was calm, a gentle breeze from the southeast. Marcus adjusted his aim slightly, accounting for the Coriolis effect and the slight gravitational variations that Earth's moon caused. Variables that no computer could calculate as precisely as a human sniper's instinct. "Whenever you're ready, Sergeant," Colonel Harrison said, though Marcus could hear the tension in his voice. This demonstration would determine whether Earth could join the coalition as an equal partner or be relegated to a protectorate status, a client species providing raw materials while the advanced civilizations handled military matters. Marcus took a deep breath, feeling his heartbeat slow as it always did in these moments. The aliens chatted among themselves, probably placing bets on how spectacularly the primitive human weapon would fail. Zektar's natural armor glinted in the sunlight, reminding Marcus that the coalition species were built for war in ways humans never could be. But they'd grown complacent, relying on technology to do what humans had always done with skill and determination. The crosshairs settled on the target. Marcus squeezed the trigger slowly, steadily, the way his grandfather had taught him. The rifle bucked against his shoulder with familiar force, the chemical explosion sending a tungsten core projectile screaming across the 2 kilometers of open air at nearly 3 times the speed of sound. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. The shield shimmered slightly as the bullet approached, its sensors detecting the incoming projectile and beginning the deflection sequence. But the coalition's energy-based thinking had betrayed them. The shield was designed to bend spacetime slightly, creating a gravitational lens that would redirect energy weapons around the protected target. A solid object moving at hypersonic speeds, however, carried momentum that no localized gravitational field could easily redirect. The bullet punched through the shield like it wasn't there, the field's attempt to bend its trajectory succeeding only in causing the projectile to tumble slightly. The tungsten core, heated to plasma temperatures by friction with the shield, struck the neutronium composite armor with the force of a small meteor. The resulting explosion sent shockwaves across the firing range. When the smoke cleared, the target was gone, not damaged or dented, but completely vaporized along with the posts supporting it and a significant crater in the ground behind it. The silence that followed was deafening. Zektar's compound eyes widened in disbelief. The Luminare representative solidified into full visibility, her energy form pulsing with what could only be described as shock. Even Dr. Yelnara's usually graceful movements had become jerky with surprise. How, she finally managed, her forearms trembling slightly. The calculations show it's impossible. The energy requirements alone should have. Energy requirements for what? Marcus asked as he began cleaning his rifle, the ritual ingrained from years of practice. I didn't use energy. I used physics. Colonel Harrison stepped forward, his expression carefully neutral though Marcus could see the satisfaction in his eyes. The shield is designed to deflect energy weapons by creating gravitational distortions. But those distortions are relatively weak, they have to be, or they'd tear apart the person wearing the shield. A solid projectile with enough mass and velocity can punch straight through. But the armor itself, Zektar protested, his translated voice carrying harmonics of confusion. Neutronium composite is the hardest substance known to coalition science. Our particle beams barely scratch it. Because you're trying to melt it, Marcus explained, setting down his rifle. Heat it up until it becomes plasma. But that takes time and energy, gives the material a chance to dissipate the heat. My bullet hit that armor while moving at Mach 3. All that kinetic energy got transferred in a fraction of a millisecond. Didn't matter how hard the armor was, conservation of momentum doesn't care about material composition. The aliens exchanged glances, their various forms of communication creating a susurrus of clicks, whistles, and electronic pulses. Marcus could tell they were having trouble processing what they'd witnessed. For species that had spent millennia perfecting energy weapons, the idea that a simple projectile could be more effective was paradigm-shattering. This is just one example, Dr. Yelnara said finally, though her tone had lost much of its earlier confidence. Surely this is the limit of your kinetic weapon's effectiveness. Marcus smiled, thinking of the weapons lockers back at base. The experimental railguns that could fire projectiles at significant fractions of light speed. The smart bullets that could adjust their trajectory mid-flight. The armor-piercing rounds designed specifically to exploit the weaknesses they'd identified in coalition technology. Ma'am, he said politely, this is just our basic sniper rifle. Would you like to see what our real weapons can do? The delegation's reaction was immediate and telling. Several species took involuntary steps backward, their natural prey responses triggered by something primal in Marcus's tone.
Even Zektar, whose species were apex predators on their homeworld, seemed suddenly uncertain.
Perhaps, Commander Zektar said slowly, we should discuss the terms of Earth's coalition membership more thoroughly.
Colonel Harrison nodded graciously. I think that would be wise.
We have a lot to offer the coalition, and I'm sure there's much we can learn from each other. As the delegation was escorted back to their shuttle, Marcus began packing up his equipment.
The rifle went into its case with practiced efficiency, each component secured in its designated place.
It was a simple weapon, built with technologies that most species had abandoned long ago. But simplicity had its own advantages.
Sergeant Chen, Colonel Harrison called as the alien's shuttle lifted off. How does it feel to have just changed the course of human-galactic relations?
Marcus shouldered his rifle case and looked up at the departing shuttle.
Inside, he knew the aliens were frantically reviewing everything they thought they knew about warfare.
They'd spend weeks, maybe months, trying to understand how their advanced technology had been defeated by what they considered primitive weapons.
Honestly, sir? Marcus replied. Feels like Tuesday.
But, as he walked back toward the base, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this demonstration had been just the beginning. The coalition species were proud, advanced, and not used to being shown up by what they considered primitive cultures. They'd accepted the demonstration gracefully enough, but Marcus had spent enough time in combat zones to recognize the look in Zektar's compound eyes. It was the look of a predator that had just realized it might be prey.
Earth had just announced itself to the galaxy in a way that couldn't be ignored.
The question now was whether the other species would accept humans as equals, or whether they'd decide that Earth's primitive weapons were too dangerous to be left in human hands.
Marcus checked his watch.
In 3 hours, he had another demonstration scheduled, this time with the Experimental Weapons Division.
If the basic sniper rifle had impressed them, he wondered how they'd react to humanity's real innovations in warfare.
The galaxy was about to learn that humans had turned violence into an art form, and Marcus Chen was one of its master artists. But, first, he had a report to write. After all, even paradigm-shifting military demonstrations required proper documentation. 3 weeks after the demonstration, the Coalition's response arrived in the form of a massive dreadnought that dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system. The ship was a testament to galactic engineering prowess, 5 kilometers long, bristling with energy weapons that could level continents, and protected by shields that could deflect the output of a small star. Admiral Sarah Reeves watched the alien warship through the bridge viewports of the Earth Defense Station, her weathered hands clasped behind her back. She'd commanded naval vessels for 30 years, from the old sea-based carriers to the new orbital platforms, but nothing had prepared her for the sheer scale of coalition military might. Admiral, reported Lieutenant Commander Park from the communications station, were receiving a transmission from the coalition vessel. It's demanding immediate surrender and disarmament of all kinetic weapons.
Are they now? Admiral Reeves turned to face her bridge crew, noting the tension in their postures.
The young officers had grown up on stories of humanity's expansion into space, dreams of joining a galactic community of equals. None of them had expected their first real contact with that community to come in the form of an ultimatum. The main screen flickered to life, revealing Commander Zektar's imposing form.
His chitinous armor gleamed under artificial lighting, and his compound eyes fixed on Admiral Reeves with predatory focus.
Behind him, she could see the bridge of his ship, a cathedral of alien technology that seemed to pulse with barely contained power. Admiral Reeves, Zektar's translator, rendered his clicking speech with mechanical precision. I am Commander Zektar of the Coalition Security Force.
Following your species' demonstration of primitive kinetic weapons, the High Council has determined that Earth poses a significant threat to galactic stability. Admiral Reeves smiled, the expression not reaching her eyes. Commander Zektar. What a pleasure to see you again so soon. I trust you've had time to study our little demonstration? Indeed. Your weapons violate 17 different galactic warfare conventions and represent a clear escalation in destructive capability. The High Council demands immediate disarmament of all kinetic weapon systems and submission to coalition oversight. I see.
Admiral Reeves walked to her command chair but didn't sit, keeping her stance casual but alert.
And if we refuse?
Zektar's mandibles clicked together in what she'd learned was equivalent to a predatory smile.
Your system contains 1 inhabited planet, 3 minor colonies, and approximately 8 billion sentient beings. My dreadnought carries enough firepower to sterilize all of them.
I believe your species understands the concept of overwhelming force. The bridge fell silent except for the soft hum of electronics. Admiral Reeves could feel her crew's eyes on her, waiting for her response. In the old days, faced with an enemy that outgunned them by orders of magnitude, the smart play would be surrender or negotiation. But these weren't the old days, and humanity had learned new tricks. "That's quite an impressive ship you have there, Commander," Admiral Reeves said finally.
"Tell me, what's its maximum engagement range?"
Zektar's translator paused for a moment, processing the unexpected question.
"Our primary particle cannons are effective out to 50,000 kilometers. Why do you ask?"
"Professional curiosity. You see, I've been in the Navy long enough to learn that the first rule of warfare is to know your enemy's capabilities." Admiral Reeves gestured to Lieutenant Commander Park, who began inputting commands at his station.
"The second rule is to never fight on your enemy's terms."
"Admiral," Zektar's tone carried warning harmonics, "I hope you're not contemplating resistance. Your orbital platforms are impressive by primitive standards, but they cannot possibly match coalition firepower."
"Oh, I quite agree," Admiral Reeves replied. "Our orbital platforms would be useless in a direct engagement."
"Lucky for us, we don't plan on a direct engagement." On the tactical display, a series of contacts appeared at the edge of the solar system. Small signatures, barely detectable even to Earth's sensors. To coalition technology, designed to track massive energy signatures, they would be virtually invisible. "What you're seeing, Commander, are our real defensive systems.
Not energy weapons or particle cannons, those would be suicide against your technology. No, these are something much simpler." Admiral Reeves smiled. "Kinetic kill vehicles.
Simple tungsten rods accelerated to near-light speeds using solar-powered mass drivers we've been building in the asteroid belt for the past 15 years. Zektar's compound eyes widened as his ship's sensors finally began detecting the incoming projectiles. Dozens of them, each one no bigger than a telephone pole but moving at velocities that made them effectively impossible to stop. "Your shields," Admiral Reeves continued conversationally, "are designed to deflect energy weapons.
They're quite impressive, I've read the technical specifications.
But they operate on the same principle as the personal shields we defeated 3 weeks ago. They create localized gravitational distortions to redirect energy around your ship." "Impossible," Zektar's voice carried harmonics of disbelief.
Our gravitational field generators can redirect objects up to planetary mass. When they have time to build up the necessary field strength, yes. But these projectiles are moving at 0.09 light speed. At that velocity, relativistic effects come into play.
Your shields would need to generate gravitational fields strong enough to bend spacetime itself to deflect them effectively." The tactical display updated, showing the coalition dreadnought's frantic attempts to maneuver away from the incoming barrage.
Its massive engines, designed for efficiency rather than agility, could barely alter its trajectory before the first kinetic kill vehicle arrived.
The impact was spectacular. The tungsten rod, moving at nearly light speed, struck the dreadnought's forward shields with the energy equivalent of a small nuclear weapon. The gravitational field generators, designed to redirect energy weapons moving at light speed, could barely affect the trajectory of a solid object with that much relativistic mass behind it. The shield collapsed under the strain, and the tungsten rod punched through the ship's armor like paper. The resulting explosion sent shockwaves through the massive vessel, lights flickering as power systems struggled to compensate for the damage.
"Status report," Admiral Reeves called to her tactical officer. "Multiple hits confirmed.
Enemy vessel has lost forward shielding and shows significant structural damage to the forward sections.
No critical systems destroyed, but they're definitely hurt."
"Commander Zektar," Admiral Reeves addressed the alien commander, whose image on the screen was now flickering due to damage to his ship's systems. "Are you prepared to discuss terms?" Zektar's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation.
"This is impossible. Your species lacks the technology to accelerate projectiles to such velocities. Actually, the technology is quite simple. We've been using mass drivers for decades to launch cargo between planets. The only innovation was scaling them up and aiming them at targets instead of delivery points. Admiral Reeves gestured to another display showing the asteroid belt installations.
Solar power is abundant out there, and we've had plenty of time to build up our infrastructure.
But the energy requirements alone are massive, yes. Which is why we've been building solar collection arrays the size of small moons.
When you have an entire solar system's worth of resources and 15 years to prepare, you can accomplish quite a lot.
The truth was more complex than Admiral Reeves was letting on. Humanity's kinetic weapon systems were the result of a crash program initiated the moment they'd learned about galactic civilization.
While other species had evolved beyond kinetic weapons millennia ago, humans had spent decades perfecting them to deal with threats they couldn't match with energy weapons. Your ship is badly damaged, Commander, Admiral Reeves continued. My tactical officer tells me you've lost approximately 30% of your offensive capability and all of your forward shielding. Meanwhile, we have 47 more kinetic kill vehicles in transit, with another 100 ready to launch from secondary positions. Zektar's image stabilized as his ship's repair systems came online.
You cannot maintain this bombardment indefinitely. Each projectile requires enormous energy expenditure.
True, Admiral Reeves admitted. But we don't need to maintain it indefinitely. We just need to maintain it long enough to destroy your ship. According to my calculations, that should take about 6 more impacts. The Coalition commander's chitinous armor gleamed as he shifted position, clearly uncomfortable with the tactical situation. His species were used to overwhelming technological superiority, to battles decided by which side could generate more energy faster.
This kind of asymmetric warfare was outside their experience. What are your terms? He asked finally.
Simple. You withdraw your ship from Earth space and report to your High Council that humanity's kinetic weapons are a legitimate part of our defensive strategy.
In exchange, we'll consider joining the coalition as equal partners rather than subjects.
And if the High Council refuses? Admiral Reeves smiled grimly. Then, they'll learn what the rest of our solar system's defenses look like. What you've seen today, Commander, is just our basic perimeter security. We have installations throughout the asteroid belt, automated systems on most of the outer moons, and some very interesting experiments going on around Jupiter. The display showed new contacts appearing throughout the solar system, defensive platforms that had been hidden or powered down, revealing themselves now that the threat was apparent. It was an impressive show of force, even if half of the contacts were decoys or inflated sensor readings. Zektar studied the tactical information for several minutes, his compound eyes processing data at inhuman speeds.
Finally, he spoke. I will relay your message to the High Council. But, Admiral, I should warn you, the Coalition does not take kindly to threats. Commander, Admiral Reeves replied, humanity has been dealing with beings who don't take kindly to threats for our entire history. We're quite good at it.
The communication channel closed, leaving the bridge in relative silence. Admiral Reeves watched as the damaged Coalition dreadnought began moving toward the edge of the solar system, its massive engines working to put distance between it and Earth's defenses.
Admiral, Lieutenant Commander Park asked quietly, what if they come back with a fleet? Admiral Reeves considered the question.
It was the critical issue, one dreadnought they could handle, but the Coalition had hundreds of ships, each one carrying enough firepower to devastate a planet. If they decided humanity was too dangerous to exist, even Earth's innovative defenses might not be enough. Then, we show them what happens when you threaten humanity's home, she replied finally.
But, I don't think it will come to that.
The Coalition species are logical, pragmatic. They've seen what our primitive weapons can do.
They'll want to negotiate rather than fight.
What she didn't say was that Earth's defenses, impressive as they were, had been stretched to their limit for this demonstration. The kinetic kill vehicles were real, but they'd used up most of their readily available ammunition. The hidden platforms were genuine, but many of them were still under construction.
Humanity had just bluffed its way into a galactic poker game with stakes measured in planetary survival. The question now was whether they could hold their hand long enough to actually build the defenses they'd claimed to already possess. On the screen, the Coalition dreadnought reached the edge of the solar system and activated its hyperdrive. Admiral Reeves watched until the massive ship disappeared into the quantum foam of faster-than-light travel. "Set condition yellow throughout the system," she ordered. "And, get me a priority channel to Earth Command. They need to know what just happened here." As her crew scrambled to carry out her orders, Admiral Reeves settled into her command chair. Humanity had just announced itself to the galaxy not as primitive newcomers seeking acceptance, but as a species capable of defending itself against overwhelming odds. The Coalition's response would determine whether that announcement led to respect or annihilation. The Galactic Council chambers were a marvel of architectural engineering, a spherical space station positioned at the galactic core where representatives from over 300 species could gather in relative neutrality. Today, however, the usual atmosphere of diplomatic courtesy had been replaced by barely controlled panic. High Counselor Thessera glided through the crystalline corridors on her species' natural anti-gravity organs, her translucent form shimmering with the emotional displays that served her people as facial expressions. As the elected leader of the Galactic Coalition, she had presided over 2 centuries of unprecedented peace and prosperity. Now, a single species threatened to upset the delicate balance that had taken millennia to achieve. The emergency session had been called within hours of Commander Zektar's report reaching Coalition space. The visual recordings of humanity's kinetic weapons demonstration had spread through the galactic network like wildfire, generating responses that ranged from scientific fascination to existential terror. Thessera entered the main chamber to find it already filled with representatives from the major Coalition species. The Vraxian military delegation occupied their traditional position near the tactical displays, their chitinous forms bristling with barely contained aggression. Across from them, the ethereal luminary representatives flickered in and out of phase, their energy-based physiology making them naturally nervous around discussions of kinetic weapons. "High Counselor," spoke Admiral Krentak of the Vraxian fleet, his translated voice carrying harmonics of urgency. "We must address the human threat immediately. Their weapons represent a fundamental challenge to galactic stability." Thessera's form pulsed with calming blues and greens as she took her position at the center of the chamber. "Admiral, while I understand your concerns, we must approach this situation with careful deliberation. Humanity has requested membership in our coalition, not declared war upon it." "Their weapons demonstration suggests otherwise," interjected Dr. Yelnara, the coalition's chief weapons researcher. Her forearms gestured frantically as she manipulated holographic displays showing the technical analysis of human kinetic weapons. "These projectiles violate every principle of civilized warfare we've established. They're indiscriminate, impossible to disable remotely, and capable of causing catastrophic collateral damage." Representative Mordun of the Corvani Federation raised one of his 12 eye stalks in disagreement. His species were natural engineers, their society built around technological innovation and efficiency. "With respect, Dr. Yelnara, the humans' weapons are actually remarkably precise. The kinetic kill vehicles that damaged Commander Zektar's ship struck exactly where intended, causing minimal systems damage while demonstrating overwhelming capability." "That's precisely the problem," Admiral Krentak's mandibles clicked aggressively. "These weapons make our entire military doctrine obsolete. Energy shields, particle armor, electromagnetic countermeasures, none of our defensive technologies are effective against simple kinetic projectiles moving at relativistic speeds." Thessera studied the data displays surrounding the chamber. The technical analysis was sobering. Humanity's weapons were indeed primitive by galactic standards, but their simplicity made them devastatingly effective against coalition technology. It was a perfect example of asymmetric warfare, the kind that had driven several species to extinction during the galactic Dark Ages. "What are the strategic implications?" she asked, addressing the question to General Valtheta of the Coalition Defense Force. The general's crystalline form chimed softly as she processed the data. Her species thought in mathematical harmonics, their consciousness existing as living geometric patterns that could analyze vast amounts of information simultaneously. "Catastrophic," she replied finally. Human kinetic weapons render our capital ships vulnerable at ranges previously considered safe.
Their solar-powered mass drivers could, in theory, launch projectiles across interstellar distances.
No fixed installation in Coalition space would be secure.
But, surely, Representative Yilneth of the Peaceful Assembly spoke up, her melodious voice carrying the natural harmony that made her species natural diplomats. We can find a technological solution.
Our scientists have overcome greater challenges.
Dr. Yelnara's form slumped slightly, her forearms dropping to her sides.
We've been analyzing the problem for weeks.
The fundamental issue is that our defensive technologies evolved to counter energy-based weapons. Kinetic projectiles at near-light speeds carry relativistic mass that makes them effectively unstoppable by conventional means.
Then, we developed new defensive technologies, Admiral Krentak declared.
Deploy gravitational field generators powerful enough to deflect these projectiles.
The energy requirements would be astronomical, Dr. Yelnara replied.
To generate gravitational fields strong enough to deflect projectiles at those speeds would require power plants the size of small stars.
Even our most advanced fusion reactors couldn't provide sufficient energy.
Representative Corvec of the Ancient Archives spoke for the first time, his mechanical voice carrying the authority of his species' vast historical knowledge.
Perhaps we should examine precedent. Have any species previously developed similar weapons?
Dr. Yelnara manipulated her displays, calling up historical data spanning millions of years of galactic civilization.
17 species developed kinetic weapons during their technological advancement phase.
All of them abandoned such systems within centuries of achieving energy weapon technology.
Why? Thessara asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer.
Energy weapons are controllable, Dr. Yelnara explained.
They can be modulated, redirected, shut down remotely.
They allow for precise application of force and can be designed with safety interlocks.
Kinetic weapons are crude. Once fired, they cannot be recalled or modified. They're weapons of absolute destruction. General Valtheda's crystalline form chimed with analytical harmonics. That may explain why the humans developed them. Their technological evolution was shaped by constant warfare between their own species. They needed weapons that couldn't be jammed, hacked, or countered by electronic warfare,
making them exceptionally dangerous in the hands of a species that spent millennia perfecting the art of violence, Admiral Krentak added grimly. Thessara absorbed this information, her form cycling through contemplative purples and grays. The coalition had been built on the principle of technological superiority, ensuring peace. Species that achieved spaceflight were generally advanced enough to recognize the futility of warfare when faced with overwhelming force. Humanity represented something different, a species that had achieved advanced technology while retaining the aggressive instincts that most civilizations evolved past.
What are our options? She asked finally.
Military containment, Admiral Krentak responded immediately. Deploy our fleet to Earth's solar system and enforce a technological embargo. Prevent them from expanding beyond their current capabilities.
That would require a significant portion of our fleet, General Valtheda noted.
And, given their defensive capabilities, any containment action would likely result in substantial casualties.
Diplomatic integration, suggested Representative Yilneth.
Accept them as coalition members but, with restrictions on their military technology. Provide them with advanced energy weapons in exchange for discontinuing kinetic weapon development.
Assuming they agree, Representative Mordun pointed out. Their demonstration suggests they're quite proud of their primitive weapons.
They may not be willing to abandon technologies that give them strategic advantages. Dr. Yelnara manipulated her displays again, showing detailed scans of Earth's solar system.
There's another consideration. Our intelligence suggests their demonstrated capabilities represent only a fraction of their total defensive systems.
The mass drivers we observed are just what they were willing to reveal. Given their species' propensity for deception and misdirection, we must assume they have additional capabilities we haven't detected.
The chamber fell silent as the representatives contemplated this possibility.
If humanity's revealed weapons were merely the tip of the iceberg, then, the strategic balance of the galaxy had already shifted in ways they couldn't fully comprehend. High Counselor, Representative Corvek spoke again. The ancient archives contain records of one other species that successfully integrated kinetic and energy weapon technologies. The hegemony of the Burning Void achieved a synthesis that made them the dominant military force for over 50,000 years.
Thessera's form flickered with interest. What happened to them?
They transcended physical existence approximately 2 million years ago. But, before their ascension, they shared their military technologies with selected client species. The resulting conflicts nearly destroyed galactic civilization before the Great Peace Accords were established.
The implications were clear.
Humanity's weapons represented more than just a tactical challenge, they threatened the fundamental principles upon which galactic civilization was built.
We need more information, Thessera decided finally.
I propose sending a diplomatic mission to Earth. Not a military force, but a genuine attempt to understand human motivations and capabilities.
Admiral Krentak's compound eyes fixed on her with predatory focus. And if they refuse our diplomatic overtures? If they demand full coalition membership without restrictions?
Thessera's form pulsed with determined reds and golds. Then, we face a choice between accepting a dangerous new partner or fighting a war against an enemy whose capabilities we don't fully understand. With respect, High Counselor, General Valtheda's harmonic voice carried notes of concern. Our analysis suggests that such a war would be catastrophic regardless of the outcome.
Even if we achieved total victory, the damage to galactic infrastructure would take centuries to repair. And, if we lose? Representative Yilneth asked quietly. The chamber fell silent again.
Nobody wanted to voice the obvious answer. If humanity's kinetic weapons proved as effective in large-scale warfare as they had in demonstration, coalition civilization as they knew it would end.
We proceed with diplomatic contact, Thessera announced finally. But, we also begin discreet preparations for other contingencies.
Admiral Krentak, I want strategic assessments for both containment and full warfare scenarios.
General Valtheda, work with Dr. Yelnara on defensive countermeasures.
Representative Yilneth, prepare diplomatic protocols for maximum concession scenarios.
And, if the humans prove intractable? Admiral Krentak asked. Thessera's form dimmed to somber grays and blacks.
Then, we discover whether the coalition's commitment to peace extends to accepting our own potential extinction. As the representatives dispersed to carry out their assigned tasks, Thessera remained in the chamber, studying the tactical displays showing humanity's solar system. Somewhere in that collection of planets and asteroids, a species that still fought wars with chemical explosives and metal projectiles had developed weapons that threatened the most advanced military force in galactic history.
The irony wasn't lost on her. The coalition's pursuit of ever more sophisticated energy weapons had created vulnerabilities that could only be exploited by the most primitive kinetic technologies. It was as if the galaxy had spent millennia building elaborate locks, only to discover that the humans had kept the original keys. In 3 days, the diplomatic mission would depart for Earth. Thessera only hoped that when it returned, there would still be a galactic civilization left to receive its report. The message indicators on her personal communicator were already lighting up as news of the emergency session spread through coalition space. Some species were demanding immediate military action, others were calling for complete isolation of the human system. A few forward-thinking governments were already reaching out to establish independent contact with Earth. The delicate web of alliances and mutual dependencies that held the coalition together was beginning to strain under the weight of this new reality. Whatever humanity's ultimate intentions, their simple demonstration had already begun reshaping galactic civilization. Thessera activated her personal transport and glided toward her private chambers. There were preparations to make, contingencies to plan, and prayers to offer to whatever cosmic forces might be listening. The galaxy was about to discover whether peace and primitive weapons could coexist, or whether the universe was too small for both. The coalition diplomatic vessel emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system with considerably more caution than Commander Zektar's dreadnought had shown weeks earlier. Ambassador Velterra stood on the bridge of the sleek diplomatic courier, her forearms gracefully manipulating holographic displays as she studied the tactical situation. Unlike Zektar's military approach,
Velterra had chosen to arrive in a ship that prioritized communication over firepower. The vessel carried no weapons beyond basic defensive systems, its hull gleaming white with the distinctive diplomatic markings of the Galactic Coalition. If humanity chose to attack a diplomatic mission, it would send a clear message about their intentions to the entire galaxy. Ambassador, reported her aide, a young luminary whose energy form flickered with nervous patterns, were detecting multiple targeting systems locked onto our vessel. Energy signatures suggest at least 47 separate weapon platforms throughout the system. Velterra's species, the Kalari, were natural diplomats whose culture had developed around reading the subtle emotional and social currents that drove interspecies relations. Her enhanced empathic abilities let her sense the underlying tensions even through the vast distances of space. The humans were alert but not aggressive, curious rather than hostile. "Open a communication channel to Earth Command," she instructed. Standard diplomatic protocols. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the interior of what was obviously a military command center. Admiral Reeves appeared on screen, her uniform crisp and her expression professionally neutral. Behind her, Velterra could see displays showing the positions of coalition ships throughout known space, intelligence that should have been classified at the highest levels. "Ambassador Velterra," Admiral Reeves said with a slight smile, "welcome to Earth's solar system." "I trust your journey was pleasant?" "Admiral Reeves," Velterra replied, noting the human's use of her name and title despite no prior introduction. "Thank you for receiving our diplomatic mission. The High Council has sent me to discuss the terms of humanity's potential membership in the Galactic Coalition." "Potential membership?" Admiral Reeves raised an eyebrow. "I was under the impression that we'd already been accepted as equals." Velterra felt the subtle shift in emotional currents that indicated a test of some kind. The humans were probing to see how the coalition viewed their demonstration of force, whether it had been interpreted as strength or threat. "Your species' capabilities have certainly made an impression," Velterra replied diplomatically. "However, there are certain concerns about the integration of kinetic weapon technologies into coalition military doctrine." "I see." Admiral Reeves gestured to someone off-screen, and new tactical displays appeared behind her. "Perhaps we should discuss these concerns in person. Would you be willing to visit our orbital station? I can guarantee your safety, and it might help to see our defensive capabilities from a less threatening perspective." Velterra considered the invitation. Standard diplomatic protocol would suggest meeting on neutral ground or aboard the coalition vessel. But the humans were offering to show her their military installations, a gesture of either remarkable trust or supreme confidence. "I accept your invitation, Admiral. However, I'd like to bring a small staff of technical experts." "Of course. We'll transmit docking coordinates to your vessel." 2 hours later, Velterra found herself aboard Earth's primary orbital defense station, a massive structure that seemed to blend human engineering with technologies clearly derived from captured coalition equipment. The artificial gravity was perfectly calibrated for multiple species, and the air mixture had been adjusted to accommodate her delegation's various physiological needs. Admiral Reeves met them at the airlock, accompanied by a small group of human officers. Velterra immediately noticed that unlike most species' military personnel, the humans showed no obvious augmentations or technological enhancements. They appeared to be baseline biological entities, yet their confidence suggested they felt no disadvantage compared to the Coalition's enhanced soldiers. "Welcome aboard Sentinel Station," Admiral Reeves said, gesturing for the delegation to follow her. "I thought we'd start with a tour of our defensive systems, then move on to more detailed discussions about Coalition integration." As they walked through the station's corridors, Velterra's empathic senses picked up fascinating emotional currents from the human crew. There was pride, certainly, but also a kind of grim pragmatism she'd never encountered in Coalition species. These beings had prepared for war while hoping for peace, and they were equally ready for either outcome. "This is our primary tactical center," Admiral Reeves explained as they entered a vast chamber filled with holographic displays. The scale of information being processed was staggering: real-time tracking of every object in the solar system, detailed analysis of interstellar traffic, and threat assessments for dozens of potential conflict scenarios. Dr. Yelnara, who had insisted on joining the diplomatic mission, studied the displays with obvious fascination.
Your computational capabilities are impressive. How do you process this much data without quantum consciousness networks?
Distributed processing, replied Captain Martinez, the station's technical officer.
We use networks of interconnected classical computers rather than single quantum consciousness entities. It's less efficient but more resistant to interference or sabotage.
Redundant systems, Dr. Yelnara observed.
Very human.
You sacrifice efficiency for reliability. We've found that elegant solutions often fail catastrophically when subjected to unexpected stresses, Captain Martinez agreed.
Our approach prioritizes function over form. Admiral Reeves led them to another section of the tactical center where a three-dimensional hologram showed the entire solar system.
Red indicators marked the positions of kinetic weapon platforms, while blue dots represented defensive installations. The sheer number of defensive positions was sobering. This is what Commander Zektar saw during his visit, Admiral Reeves explained. 47 kinetic kill vehicle launchers positioned throughout the asteroid belt, with automated targeting systems capable of engaging multiple targets simultaneously.
But that was only your revealed capabilities, Velterra observed. Our intelligence suggests you have additional systems. Admiral Reeves smiled. Would you like to see the full scope of our defenses?
The holographic display shifted, revealing hundreds of additional installations. Weapon platforms hidden in the rings of Saturn, mass drivers built into the major asteroids, and what appeared to be mobile weapon systems capable of repositioning throughout the solar system.
This is impossible, Dr. Yelnara breathed. The energy requirements alone would exceed your total power generation capacity.
Only if we tried to power everything simultaneously, Captain Martinez explained.
Most of our systems are dormant until needed. Solar collection arrays charge capacitor banks over periods of months or years, storing energy for brief periods of maximum output.
It's a defensive strategy built around the assumption that we'd have advance warning of any attack, Admiral Reeves added. Time to power up systems and coordinate responses. Not suitable for offensive operations, but quite effective for protecting our home system. Velterra studied the displays while her empathic senses analyzed the emotional currents around her. The humans were being remarkably open about their capabilities, but she sensed there were still layers of secrets beneath what they were revealing.
Impressive, she said finally. But these are still kinetic weapons.
The Coalition's concerns remain valid. Such weapons are inherently dangerous and difficult to control.
Are they? Admiral Reeves gestured to another display showing a detailed tactical simulation. Watch this.
The simulation showed a Coalition dreadnought approaching Earth, similar to Zektar's vessel but with hostile intent. As it entered the system, kinetic kill vehicles launched from multiple platforms, their trajectories carefully calculated to disable rather than destroy the target. Precise targeting of weapons systems, shield generators, and propulsion units, Admiral Reeves narrated. Total mission kill achieved without loss of life aboard the target vessel.
But the margin for error must be enormous, Dr. Yelnara protested. Kinetic weapons can't be redirected once fired.
They can't be redirected, Captain Martinez agreed, but they can be intercepted.
Watch.
The simulation continued, showing how some of the kinetic projectiles were destroyed by smaller interceptor rounds fired from different platforms. The timing was impossibly precise, requiring computational capabilities that seemed beyond human technology.
We've had a lot of practice, Admiral Reeves explained. Asteroid collision prevention has been a priority for us since we began expanding into space.
The same systems that protect our colonies from natural impacts work quite well for surgical kinetic strikes. Velterra felt her understanding of human capabilities shifting again. These weren't crude barbarians with primitive weapons, they were a species that had turned violence into a precise science while maintaining the flexibility to adapt their systems for defensive purposes. The High Council is prepared to offer Coalition membership, she said finally, but with certain restrictions on kinetic weapon development and deployment. Admiral Reeves' expression didn't change, but Velterra's empathic senses detected a subtle shift in the emotional atmosphere.
The humans had been expecting this. What kind of restrictions? Admiral Reeves asked.
Prohibition on kinetic weapons larger than personal arms, Velterra replied, reading from a prepared diplomatic statement. Mandatory installation of coalition monitoring systems on all military installations. Acceptance of coalition oversight for any new weapon development projects. The silence that followed was pregnant with implications. Velterra could sense the humans' reaction, not anger, but a kind of amused disappointment, as if they'd hoped the coalition would be more clever in their approach. Ambassador, Admiral Reeves said finally, I appreciate the coalition's position, but I'm afraid those terms are unacceptable.
Then, what would humanity consider acceptable terms? Admiral Reeves gestured to a new display showing trade routes, resource distribution, and technological exchange networks throughout coalition space.
Full membership with all rights and privileges.
Mutual defense agreements.
Technology sharing on a voluntary basis. And formal recognition of kinetic weapons as legitimate military technology. The High Council will never agree to that last point, Velterra replied. Kinetic weapons threaten the fundamental stability of galactic civilization.
Do they? Admiral Reeves asked.
Or do they threaten the coalition's military dominance? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Velterra could sense the deeper currents beneath the diplomatic language. Humanity wasn't just seeking membership in galactic civilization, they were demanding to reshape it according to their own principles.
What are you proposing? She asked. Admiral Reeves activated another display showing comparative military capabilities. Coalition energy weapons dominated the charts in terms of raw power output and technological sophistication. But human kinetic weapons showed advantages in penetration capability, defense bypassing, and cost efficiency. A balanced approach, Admiral Reeves said. Energy weapons for most applications, kinetic weapons for specialized purposes. Mutual technology sharing that benefits everyone.
And recognition that different species might develop different solutions to similar problems.
Dr. Yelnara studied the technical data with obvious fascination.
The tactical implications are significant.
Combined arms doctrine using both energy and kinetic systems would be devastatingly effective. Against external threats, Admiral Reeves agreed.
But it would also make internal conflicts far more costly, encouraging diplomatic solutions over military ones. Velterra felt the elegant logic of the human position. By making warfare more dangerous, they were paradoxically making peace more attractive. It was a strategy her diplomatic training had never considered. I'll relay your position to the High Council, she said finally. But I should warn you, there are elements within the coalition that see humanity as an existential threat.
Admiral Reeves nodded grimly.
We're aware of that possibility.
But, Ambassador, I should warn you as well, we've spent our entire history dealing with existential threats. We've gotten quite good at it.
As the diplomatic delegation prepared to depart, Velterra reflected on what she'd learned.
Humanity wasn't seeking to join galactic civilization, they were offering to transform it.
The question now was whether the coalition was wise enough to accept that transformation voluntarily, or whether they would force humanity to impose it through less pleasant means. The future of the galaxy might well depend on how the High Council responded to a simple diplomatic report from Earth's solar system. 6 months after Ambassador Velterra's diplomatic mission to Earth, the galaxy had fundamentally changed. The transformation began subtly, small adjustments in trade routes, discrete modifications to military doctrine, and quiet conversations in the halls of the Galactic Council. But, like kinetic projectiles themselves, once set in motion, the changes proved impossible to stop. High Counselor Thessera stood before the assembled representatives in the council chambers, her translucent form cycling through colors that reflected the complex emotions of this historic moment. The formal vote on humanity's coalition membership had been scheduled for today, but everyone present knew that the real decisions had been made weeks ago in private negotiations and backroom deals. The question before us, Thessera announced, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems, is not merely whether to admit humanity to coalition membership.
The question is whether we are prepared to fundamentally reshape galactic civilization.
Admiral Krentak of the Vraxian fleet occupied his species' traditional position, but his usual aggressive posture had been replaced by something approaching resignation. The military analysis had been clear and unforgiving: kinetic weapons changed everything. Coalition fleets that had dominated space for millennia were suddenly vulnerable to attack by species they'd previously considered primitive. "The humans have forced our hand," he admitted, his translated voice carrying none of its former confidence. "Our wargames show that any conflict with Earth would result in casualties we cannot afford. Not because they're stronger, but because their weapons make our strongest ships into expensive targets." Dr. Yelnara activated a holographic display showing the results of coalition weapons testing. Over the past months, they'd attempted to develop countermeasures for human kinetic weapons, with limited success. "Gravitational deflector fields require too much power," she reported. "Armor thick enough to stop relativistic projectiles would make ships too massive for effective maneuvering. Point defense systems can intercept some incoming rounds, but not enough to guarantee survival against a sustained barrage." Representative Mordun's multiple eye stalks focused on different aspects of the data simultaneously. "However, our analysis also shows that combined energy and kinetic weapon systems would be remarkably effective. Human mass driver technology integrated with our targeting systems and power generation could create weapon platforms superior to anything currently deployed." The implications were clear. Rather than trying to defeat human technology, the coalition had begun adopting it. Several member species had already begun discreet negotiations with Earth for technology transfers. The economic and military advantages were too significant to ignore. "There's another factor to consider," spoke Representative Velnara, recently appointed as the coalition's primary liaison to humanity. "Human military doctrine isn't just about weapons, it's about thinking. They approach warfare as a problem to be solved rather than a contest of technological superiority." She activated another display showing tactical analyses from human military academies. The concepts were alien to coalition thinking: asymmetric warfare, force multiplication, and strategic deception. But they were devastatingly effective when properly applied. "They've offered to share their military educational programs," Velnara continued. "Not just the technology, but the doctrines and strategies that make their weapons effective. Several coalition species have already begun incorporating human tactical principles into their own military training." Thessera observed the discussion with growing understanding. This wasn't just about admitting one new species to the coalition, it was about acknowledging that their entire approach to galactic civilization had been incomplete. The coalition had achieved peace through technological superiority, but humanity offered something different: peace through mutual assured destruction. "What are humanity's current terms?" she asked. Velnara called up the formal proposal. "Full coalition membership with all rights and privileges. Mutual defense agreements. Voluntary technology sharing. And establishment of joint training programs for military and diplomatic personnel. No mention of kinetic weapon restrictions?" Admiral Krentak asked. "None. They've made it clear that such restrictions would be grounds for rejecting membership entirely." The chamber fell silent as representatives contemplated this reality. Accepting humanity's terms meant legitimizing kinetic weapons as standard military technology. Rejecting them meant facing a species that had already proven capable of defeating coalition military forces. "There's one more consideration," Representative Cor Vex spoke from the Ancient Archives section. "Our historical analysis suggests that species which successfully integrate kinetic and energy weapon technologies tend to become galactic dominant powers. The humans aren't just offering membership, they're offering partnership in reshaping galactic civilization." Thessera felt the weight of history settling around the chamber. The decision they made today would echo through the galaxy for millennia to come. Accept humanity's partnership and transform the coalition into something new, or maintain the status quo and risk being swept aside by forces they couldn't control. "I call for formal debate," she announced. Representatives wishing to speak for or against the proposal may address the chamber. For the next several hours, the council chamber became a forum for the most significant diplomatic discussion in galactic history. Species after species rose to present their positions, their arguments, and their fears about humanity's place in galactic civilization. The peaceful assembly spoke eloquently about the moral implications of legitimizing weapons of mass destruction.
The engineering guilds presented technical analyses showing the military advantages of human technology.
The border worlds described how human defensive doctrine could protect their vulnerable colonies from raiders and pirates.
Through it all, Thessera sensed the underlying current that would drive the final decision.
Fear had initially motivated the coalition's response to humanity, but practical considerations were winning the debate.
Human technology was simply too useful to reject, and their military capabilities too dangerous to oppose.
The question, she said finally, is not whether humanity will reshape galactic civilization.
They're already doing that.
The question is whether we participate in that reshaping as partners or experience it as subjects.
The vote, when it finally came, was surprisingly decisive.
307 species voted in favor of full human membership, with only 23 abstentions and no votes against. The era of energy weapon dominance in galactic civilization had officially ended.
As the formal announcement was transmitted throughout Coalition space, Thessera activated her personal communicator to contact Admiral Reeves on Earth.
"Admiral," she said when the connection was established, "I'm pleased to inform you that humanity has been accepted as a full member of the Galactic Coalition."
Admiral Reeves' image on the screen showed neither surprise nor excessive satisfaction. "Thank you, High Counselor. We look forward to contributing to galactic peace and prosperity. I trust that Earth's military capabilities will be used responsibly?"
"They'll be used exactly as they've always been used," Admiral Reeves replied with a slight smile.
"To protect our people and our interests."
"Of course, now our interests include the welfare of the entire coalition."
Over the following months, the transformation of galactic civilization accelerated.
Human military advisors began working with coalition forces, teaching the tactical doctrines that made kinetic weapons effective. Human engineers collaborated with alien scientists to develop hybrid weapon systems that combined the best features of both technologies.
The changes weren't limited to military applications.
Human diplomatic approaches, emphasizing direct negotiation over elaborate protocol, began influencing interspecies relations throughout coalition space. Human economic models, based on competitive efficiency rather than cooperative optimization, started reshaping galactic trade networks.
Most significantly, humanity's approach to problem-solving began spreading throughout coalition civilization.
Where alien species had traditionally sought elegant, technology-based solutions to challenges, humans offered practical, adaptable alternatives that could function even under adverse conditions. Marcus Chen, now wearing the insignia of a coalition military advisor, stood on the observation deck of a joint human-alien research station orbiting Jupiter. Through the transparent aluminum windows, he could see the massive solar collection arrays that powered the station's experimental weapon systems. Sergeant Chen called Dr. Yelnara as she approached, her forearms carrying data tablets showing the latest test results. "The new hybrid mass drivers are exceeding all performance projections." Marcus smiled as he reviewed the data. The weapons combined human kinetic projectile technology with alien targeting systems and power generation, creating platforms that could engage targets across interplanetary distances with pinpoint accuracy.
"How are the alien crews adapting to kinetic weapon tactics?" he asked.
"Better than expected," Dr. Yelnara replied.
"The Vraxians in particular have shown remarkable aptitude for long-range precision shooting.
Their natural predatory instincts translate well to sniper doctrine."
"And the coalition military leadership? Fully committed to the new paradigm.
Admiral Krentak has requested human advisors for all major fleet exercises."
Marcus nodded, thinking of the irony. 6 months ago, these same aliens had considered human weapons primitive and obsolete.
Now they were eagerly adopting not just the weapons themselves, but the entire military philosophy that made them effective. A communication alert chimed through the station's speakers.
"All personnel, we have an incoming priority transmission from Coalition Command."
Dr. Yelnara's form shifted with curiosity as they made their way to the communications center. The main screen activated to show High Counselor Thessera's distinctive crystalline form, but her usual calm composure seemed strained.
"Attention all coalition forces," Thessera announced. long-range sensors have detected an invasion fleet approaching from outside the galaxy.
Initial analysis suggests the ships belong to the Devourers, an extinct species that disappeared from galactic civilization over 2 million years ago.
Marcus felt a familiar tension settling in his shoulders, the feeling that came before combat.
Around the communication center, alien personnel were reacting with various species-specific expressions of shock and fear. Fleet composition includes over 3,000 vessels of unknown design, Thessera continued.
Energy signatures suggest weapon systems far in advance of current coalition technology.
All military forces are ordered to implement Emergency Protocol 7 immediately.
The transmission ended, leaving the communication center in stunned silence.
Marcus looked at Dr. Yelnara, whose forearms were trembling slightly as she processed the implications. 3,000 ships, she whispered. With advanced technology.
How can we possibly defend against that?
Marcus smiled grimly, thinking of the lessons his grandfather had taught him about asymmetric warfare. The Devourers might have superior technology, but they were about to encounter something they'd never faced before: human military doctrine backed by galactic resources. Doctor, he said, activating his personal communicator to contact Earth Command, I think it's time to show the galaxy what human weapons can really do.
As emergency alerts spread throughout Coalition space, humanity prepared to defend its new galactic home with the same determination they'd once used to protect Earth. The Devourers were about to learn why the rest of the galaxy had ultimately chosen to embrace humanity's primitive weapons rather than face them as enemies. The age of galactic warfare was about to begin, and humanity would be leading the charge with technologies older than civilization itself. Sometimes the old ways really were the deadliest ways, and the galaxy was about to prove that ancient truth on a scale never before imagined. The Sniper's Edge had become the galaxy's shield, and Marcus Chen was ready to show the universe what Earth's most primitive weapon could accomplish when wielded by a species that had never learned to surrender.